Your brand in the 2020s and beyond is everything that your most important stakeholders at these larger companies are saying about you when you're not in the room. And you know what? Now that we have a self-service buyer's journey where you don't get to meet prospects till they're 83% of the way through their process, you're not in the room for very much of the decision making anymore. So what's going to do the heavy lifting for you? Good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and we are thrilled to have you with us today for Data Center Lead Generation 201. We're going to be talking all about how to get to decision makers and larger sales. It's a very hot topic, regardless of whether you're coming from the perspective of a data center operator like co-location or hyperscale, wholesale edge or modular, or maybe you're from a technology or facilities company that sells to or partners with data centers, or perhaps you do something related to real estate or construction in and around digital infrastructure and data centers, or maybe you're from a company that does something related to sales and marketing with the data center industry. But either way, if you're trying to improve your lead generation, you're for sure in the right place. Plan a webinar like this, I'm very focused on making sure that I talk about what's top of mind with you. So as part of that process, when everyone signed up for this webinar, you were asked to tell what is your biggest marketing and sales challenge. So that's going to help to inform a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. But for those of you that we have not met yet, I'm Joshua Feinberg. I help go-to-market teams in and around the data center industry, most of all, get found much earlier on in the buyer's journey so they can differentiate, improve their competitive positioning, be seen as a thought leader, accelerate sales cycles, and scale sustainable, profitable revenue growth. I've spoken at highly rated educational sessions at some of the industry's most popular conferences. I have served in leadership roles in and around the data center and more broadly IT and marketing and sales ecosystem. I'm a former Microsoft and IBM contractor. I was heavily involved in the HubSpot channel partner ecosystem for the better part of a decade and co-led a HubSpot user group around the same time. I'm very passionate about helping you figure out what it takes to get found by the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. I'm often asked how I got involved in the data center industry, and it's a really interesting story. I spent the early part of my career in and around IT services, having a system builder business, having a network integration business, being basically a fractional CTO for small and mid-sized businesses. After doing that for a while, I started advising other companies in a similar space, did contract work for Microsoft, did some content provider work for a couple of big trade publications in the space. And in the early 2010s, I saw a lot of the companies in that space facing a lot of pressure to figure out what their next act was going to do as client server moved to SaaS and public cloud. And I saw most of the managed service providers and value-added resellers and system integrators going in one of three directions. Some of them got into custom software development, like building apps. Some of them got moved up market into mid-market ERP, like enterprise resource planning and similar systems to that. And quite a few of them were getting involved in one way, shape, or form of co-location. Either they took their own box and put it in a co-location facility and rented out slices of that to their existing SMB IT clients, or a couple of really forward-thinking progressive clients gave them the box and said, we have no idea what to do with this, but go put it in Digital Realty, go put it in Equinix, go put it in wherever, and help us with the provisioning and ongoing management. After all, you're our outsourced IT department, right? So yeah, it's funny, when I first got into the data center space about 10 years ago, I had a fairly good grasp of co-location. It's only been probably in the last 5 or 6 years that I gained a much broader grasp of hyperscale and wholesale and the whole huge ecosystem around technology, facilities, capital, and real estate and construction, and everything that goes into this ecosystem. DCSMI is all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. As I mentioned earlier, whenever I plan a webinar like this, I'm super focused on making sure that I deliver a lot of value to you. So I'm always asking, like, what's top of mind? And when I asked for this particular webinar, I heard things like reaching decision makers, lead generation, attracting new clients, differentiation, and segmentation, which is super fascinating to me because most of my career, I've seen so many companies in and around the space really struggle with figuring out their both of those factors, differentiation and especially segmentation. So what is on the agenda today? We're going to start with a quick recap of Data Center Lead Generation 101, which was a foundational webinar that I hosted a few weeks ago, just to make sure that we are on the same page with the highlights. And then the majority of the content for today is going to be divided up into two sections. For the first part is going to be my 3 favorite best practices and plays that everyone across full go-to-market teams should be focusing on when it comes to more effective intermediate level lead generation, especially focused on target accounts, especially focused on larger sales and getting to decision makers. And then the majority of today's webinar is going to be focused on just basically answering the biggest questions that tend to come up most often across the full journey when it comes to attracting the decision-making committee for larger sales, improving your lead generation among your target accounts, closing larger sales, accelerating more leads that are mid-funnel, mid-stage into sales opportunities within the decision-making committee, and then expanding your relationship, land and expand the customer success account management type of motion to get to more decision makers within your target accounts. We'll switch it over to any Q&A that's come in throughout today's webinar. We have a pretty large crowd with us today, so I can't guarantee that I will get to all of them. But if there's additional questions that you think of that you would like to submit for consideration for the informal Q&A session that'll immediately follow today's webinar, by all means, put them in the chat panel or in the comments. And especially if they get upvoted, we'll try to get to as many of those as possible during the Q&A session. As mentioned, I just want to make sure that we are on the same page and that we review some of the most important foundational issues that are part of Data Center Lead Generation 101. For starters, in case you haven't heard, AI is a really big deal in the data center industry, artificial intelligence. And what you see up there on the slide is Jensen Huang. He's the CEO of NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is literally leading the charge on anything and everything that's happening with AI in and around the data center industry. At the risk of making this recording rather un-evergreen, NVIDIA, I think, is actually even reporting earnings today. So, what's been super interesting is as AI and OpenAI and ChatGPT and Sam Altman have all become mainstream over the last 18 months, our industry, the data center industry, went from getting coverage in mainstream financial media like CNBC, the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Financial Times, Bloomberg. They used to get coverage like maybe 4 times a year when like one of the big REITs reported their quarterly earnings. Now it's, there's some weeks where they're on 4 times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, talking about digital infrastructure in the data center industry. So if you're anything like me, you're probably, when you go to family gatherings and parties and stuff like that, you have people that work way outside of the IT industry that are curious about picking your brains about AI and probably have some pretty strong opinions. But Jensen Huang is extraordinarily bullish on the future of the data center industry tied to the chips that NVIDIA makes, and he's predicting that $1 trillion, $1 trillion in data center upgrades are going to be happening in the next 4 years, starting with the big hyperscalers with Microsoft, Meta, Google, and Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Meta. His buddy Michael Dell is also equally as bullish. Michael Dell is predicting that there's going to be 100-fold increase in data center demand over the next 10 years. And you don't have to look far to find many other people with similar kinds of very, very optimistic prognostications. But our thoughts over at DCSMI is that these gains are not going to be distributed evenly throughout the industry because certain companies are in a much better shape than others to capitalize on this massive amount of investment, not just because of their existing products and services and their roadmap and their positioning and branding, but some are doing a much better job of adjusting to the new dynamics of how people make purchases. There's been a really big change and a really big acceleration in how people in mid-market and enterprise, B2B tech especially, research and make their purchase decisions. If we were having this webinar 10 years ago, and I actually have been talking about this exact topic, and if you dig backwards, you'll see that I've been covering this topic for 10 years. That number that you see on the screen, the 83%, used to be 56%. CEB, the corporate executive board, that's now part of Gartner, found in the mid 2010s about 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before you met a prospect. In other words, they got about halfway through the research and decision making process, and then they said, okay, yeah, now I'm ready to meet with the salesperson. That number has accelerated all the way to 83%. We think some of it was just digital adoption. We think it's next generation coming up with different purchase preferences. We know, of course, 2 years of people working from home during the peak of the pandemic accelerated all these trends, but we're now to the point where 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before you meet a prospect. Researching, all of their researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing is now happening in a self-serve mode. And this has massive implications for how you go about generating and nurturing and accelerating leads into new client opportunities. Some parts of the data center industry are very well plugged into this. A lot of people are kicking and screaming about this. And I've been saying for probably 6 months to a year now, it's like you're trying to sell artificial intelligence and high performance computing out of the back of a DeSoto or a Model T Ford or a horse and buggy. It just makes, or using like a dial-up modem or a fax machine. It makes no sense instinctively when you look at your typical buyer personas, you look at your stakeholders, you look at the decision committee, and you realize that they're all using technology, SaaS and cloud and mobile, the same exact way that we are. And this isn't just the edge cases. McKinsey found 70 to 80% of people now prefer a digital buyer's journey. LinkedIn's done a lot of research on this as the dominant, most trusted professional networking platform on the planet, and found that thought leadership is really important for breaking through with this, but it can be really difficult and challenging to cut through the noise, which is why we're having this talk today. What's super important is to get very clear about who it is that you're trying to attract. Is it someone like CTO, CIO, Oscar? What you see, by the way, are screenshots of buyer personas. These are blueprints or roadmaps of what it takes for you to really understand what's going inside of the mind of the people, the decision makers, the people that work for the decision makers, and what it's going to take to really have your messaging resonate, to your content, your sales messaging, everything you do to try to attract and build relationships with them. And CTOs are definitely wired differently than CFOs and COOs and CEOs. They all care about, in some cases, anywhere from slightly to very, very different things. They have different goals they work on. They have different challenges they work on. They have different things that can get them a big bonus or promotion. They have different things that are stressing them out that can cause them to have the opposite of a promotion happening. So we need to be very, very focused on who the decision makers are that are most important to our business, who works for them, who's within their team, who's within their organization, and what can we do to make sure that we're getting in early, that we have a chance to be seen as the go-to experts in the space, the teachers, the trusted advisors, the thought leaders, the consultants. And in many ways, I've been saying this for a couple of years now, the sales professional of the future in this industry should look a lot more like a big four consultants and a lot less like a transaction focused salesperson. In other words, they should have the aura, the positioning, the vibe of somebody that's that's been hired for a big consulting project that works for like PwC or EY or KPMG or Deloitte or something like that, as opposed to someone that's just focused on making a commission and closing a sale, making quota. So it's super important that we have a presence with our most important accounts for larger sales, target accounts, target decision makers throughout their entire buyer's journey, throughout awareness, when they have a goal or a challenge they're trying to figure out, during the consideration phase, when they're comparing all the different options that are in front of them, and of course at the decision phase. Most companies in and around the data center industry are doing a okay job in the decision stage, but there's a massive shortfall in the awareness and the consideration stage. And this is an enormous problem because the companies, the media, whatever is getting in front of your prospects and clients during the awareness and consideration phase, those are the ones that are doing all the teaching. Those are all the ones that are building the brand affinity, that are building the loyalty, that are help steering the conversation for how they evaluate all the different options in front of them. And if you get in early, you're in really good shape. You're almost guaranteed, and you stay with them throughout the journey, you're almost guaranteed to be on that short list when it comes to decision time. But if you don't get found, if somehow you manage to figure out a way to show up at the end, unfortunately, the only thing that's going to sway them many times is cheaper and the race to the bottom. And none of us really want to be in that business, right? A typical journey between stranger and decision will often have as many as 28 touch points. And if you think about a reasonable allocation of where those touch points are happening, think about 12 of those 28 touch points happening in awareness when they're doing self-guided research, like another half, about 11 or 12 of those happening in the middle when they're comparing all of the different options, and about 5 happening in decision. If your company is typical of most operators or tech or facility or real estate or construction companies in and around the data center industry, you likely are investing a lot in events and in field marketing and doing amazing field marketing. And when I say amazing, you're talking about on LinkedIn. There's someone literally doing this today about that they're having an amazing cabana party poolside in Las Vegas. And I'm not picking on the cabana parties; they can be a lot of fun. It's great to socialize with your peers, and it's certainly that's a big draw with the conferences. But the reality is, no matter how good of a job you do with those events, it's still only 1 or 2 touch points. So when the conference is over and the post party is over, and most of your prospects, most of the decision committee is flying back home, the party after the party is almost certainly going to continue going on LinkedIn. And the companies that have great content and have a way to stay with those prospects throughout their full buyer's journey, throughout the rest of the 26 touch points, are more than likely going to be the ones that win, because no matter how epic those events are, it's extremely unlikely that the people that are on the decision committee are waiting till next year's event to continue the research and decision-making process on how to address this in the company. So think about, even if you're doing those, what about the other 25, 26, 28 touch points? What else is going to happen the other 350 days of the year? Even if you're doing a dozen events like this, you still have to cover another 300 days of the year. So if you want to think about modernizing your lead generation strategy, the best practices, we got to have a way to convert more visitors on our website to leads. We have to recognize that the website is the lead growth engine. 7/24, 365. It doesn't need time off. It never gets sick, never has personal emergencies. It's there all the time. And you'd be shocked how many of your prospects look for solving problems, looking for answers in non-traditional business hours. Like you'd think, like, is someone the visitors on our website at 2:00 in the morning? They must be from overseas or something like that. No, you'd be surprised how many times someone's up at 11 o'clock at night, 2:00 in the morning, 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon, trying to figure stuff out because there's some kind of crisis going on in the company and they just need answers. That's the self-serve motion. So what can we do to make it all about them? Stop thinking about what you want to talk about and figure out what they want to hear about, what they're trying to learn. That's the importance of starting with really well-researched buyer personas, so you understand their goals, their struggles, their challenges, what they need to figure out in their own words. Not the words that we think that they might be saying or probably saying, but the words that they're actually saying. And what can be especially dangerous is if you've been doing this for a couple of decades, just kind of guessing without getting the words out of their own mouth and figuring out the consensus. But if we need to get to decision makers, we need to understand the words that decision makers use. If we need better surface area on the decision by committee, we need to understand of the people that sit on those committees, what are the words they're actually using. And this is all critical to putting together the pieces to accelerate the sales cycle for larger sales. From a tactical basis, I want to talk with you for a few moments about how we can get your LinkedIn profile in shape and your company page in shape for decision makers. And for 80 or 90% of you, your LinkedIn is probably somewhere between at least passable to very good to excellent. I still come across even 2 people I came across this morning who reached out to me, and I went to go look them up on LinkedIn. And one literally had nothing filled out in 1 connection. Not 10, not 100, but literally 1 connection. I come across almost every week a handful of people in this industry who think that because they personally don't like social media, that they do not need to participate on LinkedIn. You can go do your buyer persona research and figure out if your buyer personas are the extreme edge cases that have completely opted out of how all professional networking is happening today. But I have yet to find significant pockets, significant segments in the data center ecosystem where there's buyers or people that work for buyers that have completed out of this. So if you're selling to the middle and even the edges of the bell curve, make sure that you have a good professional looking headshot. The headshot should not include wearing sunglasses unless you're visually impaired. It should not include a coworker. It should not include a spouse. It should not include a big fish that you caught. It should not include your pet. It should look professional. You should be dressed professionally, the same as you would if you went to a business event. It could be wearing a suit, dress, skirt, blazer, whatever. It could be business casual, but you should look presentable in a business context. Your headline should be benefits focused from the point of view of your buyer personas. Your boss may care intensely about how many times you've went to President's Club. Your prospects, they don't care about that. They just care about your ability to solve their problems. So think more like presenting yourself like a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, a thought leader, more than bragging about your personal sales accomplishments. Super important, benefits focused headline. Same thing carries through in your summary. It should be benefits focused from the point of view of your buyer personas. Your number of connections, like you really need to check the box off on 500 plus connections to be a significant force, be a significant presence in the data center industry without having at least 500 people that you've met over the years or who've connected with you or something. Like, you just need to go figure it out. I've done a lot of workshops over the years on social selling in and around the data center industry. I'll probably redo it at some point in the next year or two, but like, yeah, even if you're brand new to LinkedIn, go to everyone that's in your contacts list, your former coworkers, everyone, and just try to get that number up above a credible 500 and try to get it to people that would find your content that you're going to share interesting. Otherwise, it's going to hurt you down the road with your organic engagement. And make sure that this is another huge thing that I see going on in the data center industry. Make sure you're attached to your company page the right way. In other words, when people look at your jobs, the logo for your company shows up in full radiant color there, as opposed to like this default ugly gray box, which shows that, hey, I don't know how to use LinkedIn. Why am I spending so much time on LinkedIn? Because this is the new business card. This is the credibility. This is your front door. This is your first impression. And if you're struggling, this slide was actually fun to put together. If you're struggling to understand why your LinkedIn profile is really your business card in 2024 and beyond, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but like, you're thinking more like somebody that's using a Mac from 25 years ago and a Palm Pilot and the Back to the Future DeLorean, because you're thinking that people are still researching and making their purchase decisions the same way they did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But 10, 20 years ago was really the last time that somebody would have taken a meeting with you without first looking you up on LinkedIn. What can we do to grow your LinkedIn connections at target accounts? Well, for starters, you need a list of target accounts. Let's go with the idea that it's sitting in your CRM or a Excel or Google spreadsheet or something like that. And if you don't have a list of target accounts, everyone that's serious about growing in and around the data center industry should make a small investment in their growth and make sure that they have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account. It doesn't matter at what level. Obviously, there's more bells and whistles as you go up to higher levels. But in order to be able to do the complex filters and build out and maintain and know exactly what's going on in your target accounts, it's just a cost of doing business. And more than likely, your company is already funding huge investments in field marketing or event marketing. It's just a tool that you need. So as you can see there on the screen, there's a couple target accounts that are listed there with the number of employees. We filtered on those people that work for those companies that work in an information technology job function. And our goal is to keep track of how many first degree connections we have for people that work in IT related roles in our target accounts. Obviously, this will get more nuanced and more filtered and everything over time. But for many of you that have never done this in the past, this is a really great place to start. Some homework with this, some action items, is to make sure every week that you're searching for and noting your number of first degree connections that you have in your target companies that work in an information technology job function. And then I want you to search for second degree connections in those companies. And for anyone that you come across that has more than 500 connections and has dozens of mutual connections with you, this dozens of mutual connections with you is super important. Just simply invite them, and a lot of them will accept back. I can tell you without a doubt that a significant percentage of those that will decide whether to accept your connection are going to go to your LinkedIn profile and check you out. So that's what we were just talking about a moment ago. If your LinkedIn profile has some credibility problems, it needs to be fixed, because it's going to harm your ability to sustain growth within your target accounts, get you closer to decision makers, or at least the decision committee, and get you set up for success in mid-market and enterprise larger sales. So again, dozens of mutual connections, and you're going to do this iteratively. What does that mean? That You invite, for example, 50 people this week. Let's say 30 of those 50 people accept in the next 7 days. Great. You just got access now to their second degree connection. So each time you go back and repeat and repeat and repeat, there's more surface area for you to continue growing in your accounts. And for many of you, your CRM, like in HubSpot Professional Enterprise or something like that, can usually tell you how many contacts you have in each of your target accounts at the same company. And they can probably also tell you some measure of activity, like a last site revisit or form submissions or some other thing that's aligned with your scoring. What you can see there is a screenshot from LinkedIn Sales Navigator of a target account. This is Freddie Mac, something financial services related. And we're looking specifically for people that have an information technology job function, first degree connections. And as you can see there from the job titles, at least of the 5 people that are on the screen here, at least 2 or 3 of them look pretty closely related to infrastructure. So they may not necessarily be on the decision committee, but if you keep repeating this exercise and you grow to have a couple dozen people in an account like this, you will for sure start getting connections with people that are either on the decision committee or work directly with people that are. So the reason to get way more connections, to build this up, and the reason why most of you that are on this webinar need way more first degree connections in your target accounts than you currently have today, is done the right way as opposed to indiscriminately. More of the right people will have a chance to see your organic posts that you share. Over time, I'd recommend that more of those organic posts be aligned with what your buyer personas care most about, their goals and their challenges, essentially what most people would be considering educational content or thought leadership kind of content, as opposed to, hey, just clap for us, we're wonderful, we're opening a new location, we want a new award, yada, 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 which are great for people that are at the decision stage and your internal stakeholders, but complete strangers, it's not going to win you. It's not going to win you attention of complete strangers, but super critical to have more of the right people connected with you. So more of the right people, so we have more of an audience potentially for your organic content. Second, if you decide to have a LinkedIn newsletter, which is a great idea, that you're, for example, publishing to weekly off of your LinkedIn profile. As people connect with you, they will be automatically invited to subscribe to your LinkedIn profile newsletter. You can also do the exact same thing on your LinkedIn company page. Many of you are likely subscribed to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that's attached to the DCSMI LinkedIn company page. If you're not, feel free to go over to the DCSMI LinkedIn company page, follow the page, and subscribe to the newsletter. Your superpowers with this book of business on LinkedIn, so to speak, this is like, the modern Rolodex for the 2020s and beyond, is you have the ability to send messages to people that are first degree connections without having to jump through all kinds of hoops and costs with LinkedIn emails. Use sparingly. Don't go nuts, because if you do go nuts and you send a lot of inappropriate messages or salesy kind of messages, what do you think people are going to do? They're either going to tune you out, or worse, they're going to disconnect and block you and you've burned a bridge. So use very sparingly. Second, you can invite your first degree connections to LinkedIn events. At the risk of sounding really meta, I bet there's some of you that are on this event today, on this webinar today, specifically because of that. LinkedIn events is free. Most people don't realize that it's free. Of course, LinkedIn being a for-profit company that's part of Microsoft, they have a way to sell you ads if you want to go even broader than your first degree connections. But you can invite up to 1,000 first degree connections each week to a LinkedIn event that you are speaking or hosting. In addition to that, you can invite people to follow your company page. So you're building your personal brand and your company brand. And on top of that, it's a tremendous source of lead intelligence to figure out who's gotten promoted, who's gotten lateral moves, who's moving on to new companies. So I can't overemphasize enough how important it is to up your LinkedIn game. Even if you don't care for social media as a whole, if you're ignoring LinkedIn, you are missing the 7x24 by 365 trade show that leads a path to your personal brand for decision makers, for the decision committee, and for mid-market and enterprise sales. Take to spread your thought leadership throughout these target accounts, because that's super important as well. Keep in mind that when it comes to considered purchase decisions, which nearly everything in the data center industry is a considered purchase decision, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to get very many impulse buyers. most of these decisions are going to be made by committee now, especially on larger sales. And the bigger the sale is, the more that's at stake, the more people are likely going to weigh in. So even if you magically manage to meet the CEO or the CTO or the CISO or the director of network operations or whatever, who's the massive decision maker in this process, and even if you have great rapport with them, they were almost certainly going to send you to go meet with the folks on their team. So we need to have a way to get us spread around among the team. In order for people to spread your company and formally recommend you for their team, you will have to already be post-decision stage, because they're sticking their neck out on the line and they're making a risky move on their part. How do you de-risk the situation? Instead of them formally recommending you and your company, all they're doing is saying, hey, Bob, hey, Sally, I found this cool ebook. I think you'll find it helpful. Hey, there's this great research report. We should check it out on PUE ratings for co-location facilities in Northern Virginia or whatever it is. Or, hey, there's this great webinar coming up that I think a couple people from our sales team should check out on lead generation and meeting the people on the decision committee and getting prospecting for larger sales. It is so much lower risk on their part. And because of that, it's a much more natural thing that your content and your events spread without friction. And at the end of the day, why are we doing this? Because you and your company will be at a massive disadvantage if only one or two people at this target account know who you are, or know about your thought leadership or about your events and content. Why? Because it's an enormous vulnerability, either because they leave, they move to another role within the company, priorities change, what have you. It's super important. People for a couple of years have used the term multi-threading. Multi-threading, what it means is that you are taking a proactive approach to building multiple relationships within your target accounts. And having great educational content is the really, really important enabler, or the currency that helps to make this happen. For example, for those of you that have been to the DCSMI website, you know that when you subscribe or sign up to download an ebook or register for a webinar, every lead that's generated, every conversion for downloadable premium content or webinars should get an automated nurturing message that kicks back either immediately or shortly thereafter to encourage spreading your thought leadership content. So it could go something like a subject line like, hey, Bob, who else on your team at your company? You could play with personalization tokens if you want, but it could be as simple as, who else needs to read this? Who needs to be at this? Who needs to watch this? Who needs to attend this? And the body is pretty straightforward. Also, most of you likely have a message just like this from me that goes something like, did you know that it takes a village to improve this type of initiative at your company? Usually there's all kinds of stakeholders from these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different roles. And then you just simply say, if that sounds familiar, I'd encourage you to hit the forward button on your email, write a sentence or two about why this matters, and send it around to your team. And you would be shocked at how something as low tech as this, that you've been able to do for 20 years using basic email marketing automation software, you'd be shocked at how well this continues to work. And you'll know it's working because you look at your inbound leads, you look at your CRM, and you're like, that's interesting. There's 3 people from the same company that registered within a few minutes of each other for our webinar next week. There's 7 people from the same company that have downloaded our ebook. I bet they're talking about our ebook. I bet they're talking about our content. That's awesome. And you'll know it's really, really working because when they get to the 83% and you get to meet them, they tell you that they used your methodology. They used their playbook, your playbook, to structure their meetings, to help evaluate how they navigated this entire process. So your content is essentially doing a very light consulting type of engagement and work for them in terms of transformation before they get to meet your salesperson, who should also be presenting themselves as a teacher, a trusted advisor, and a consultant. So that's some food for thought on getting your profile and company page in shape, growing your LinkedIn connections at your target accounts, and spreading your thought leadership at target accounts. So it comes to attracting the decision maker committee for larger sales, a couple of questions tend to come up more often than not. The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com. Is how can data center related companies improve their brand name recognition and awareness? A lot of this we've already talked about with reviewing the foundations for data center lead generation 101, the importance of having a targeted account list, the importance of growing your connections in those target accounts and using webinars and content as a vehicle to spread your positioning throughout these companies. But probably the most important answer to this question on improving brand name awareness is to recognize that your brand is no longer just about your logo. It's no longer about your brand, just about your brand colors. It's no longer about the approved fonts that you're able to use and a tight focus on controlling the messaging coming from a centralized marketing engine or communications engine. Your brand is everything that your prospects and your customers say about your company when you're not in the room. Your brand in the 2020s and beyond is everything that your most important stakeholders at these larger companies are saying about you when you're not in the room. And you know what? Now that we have a self-service buyer's journey where you don't get to meet prospects till they're 83% of the way through their process, you're not in the room for very much of the decision-making anymore. So what's going to do the heavy lifting for you? Content, educational content, educating and building trust through your content so you're seen as a subject matter expert, a teacher, a trusted advisor, and a thought leader. And for those people that are relatively new to the industry or people that are relatively new on your team that aren't quite at the place where they're ready to be a thought leader, my advice is to be a great tour guide, to be a great concierge, to consume everyone else's thought leadership in your company that you're putting out. So when they come across prospects and customers that are talking about something that you know you have a great video or ebook or webinar about or something like that, that they go and be like, oh, yeah, I think you'll really get a lot out of going through this. Why don't I send this over to you? And next time we talk, we can go over what you felt about this and how you think it might apply to your situation. That's the tour guide. That's the concierge. And what can you do to get access to data center decision makers? Well, in order for the decision makers to want to spend time with you, there's got to be something in it for them. And I hate to have to say this, it feels weird to have to say this, but bribes and gimmicks are not going to cut it. So like if your playbook is giving somebody a gift card to show up for a sales meeting, I don't know what else to tell you except you're doing it wrong. It's astonishing to me that there are still media and events playbooks and sales playbooks in this industry and in SaaS and in B2B and mid-market enterprise tech where people think something like that could actually work. In order for decision makers, in order for people that are on the decision-making committee to want to spend time with you, you have to be able to add value beyond the content that they can consume on your own. If you are showing up and you're reading them the information that is on your website, you are not adding value. If your prospects, if people that are on these decision committees are showing up more knowledgeable about what your company does than you currently have in terms of your own knowledge, step it up. In order for decision makers and the people that are on these committees to want to spend time with you, you not only have to be super effective at answering their questions, but you need to be able to guide them 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of where they are to where you know they're almost certainly going to want to go next because you have the pattern recognition, the muscle memory of having worked with companies just like theirs and people in job roles and seniorities just like them. That's how you get access to decision makers, is by showing that you can add value to their initiative that they're working on. That's way more than just a transaction focused sales or marketing type of person in that role. What's the best way to attract data center managers from larger companies to your website? It first starts with understanding what is top of mind with the data center managers that are most important to your company, starting with doing intense buyer persona research so you understand their goals, so you understand their challenges in their own words. Not a guess on what you think those words might be, but actually in their own words. No matter how much seasoned veteran talent you have at your company, your internal input on your buyer persona should be limited to about 20%. Sure, go around and talk with salespeople, go around and talk with your account managers, your customer success people, your product team. But at the end of the day, a minimum of 80% of that input should be coming from actual research so you get their own words. That's the best way, is that extreme empathy in their own language about what they care about. Because there's no point in doing search engine optimization or search engine marketing or conversion rate optimization or social media or email marketing or webinars or any of this. It doesn't pay to do any of this if you're not going to be seen as a teacher, as an educator, as someone who is capable of adding value to their professional life. So start, if you want to attract them to you, be intensely interested about what's going on in their professional life and offer value to them that helps them up their game, that helps them improve, to help them understand how other companies, other people in similar roles in other companies have navigated these challenges. That's the key to getting data center managers from larger companies to your website. And then the rest is all reach. That growing your first degree connection strategy that we talked about a few minutes ago, incredibly helpful for that. If you're in more of a rush or you want to be able to cover even more surface area, in addition to what you're doing with your first degree connections, get someone on your team who can replicate that strategy using LinkedIn Campaign Manager, the LinkedIn ads platform, to pretty much do the exact same thing. So in addition to the first degree connections growing, and in addition to people seeing the organic content that you're sharing on your profile and on your company page, there's also extremely targeted ads, getting the right premium content offers, the right webinar information and stuff like that in front of the right people and the right companies. It's crazy how precise that can be relative to normal organic reach. Next set of questions that I want to make sure that we cover today is how to improve lead generation from your target accounts. And within that broader category, some of the biggest questions that people typically care about, sales teams find prospects for larger sales at the right time. Here's the tricky part. Everyone acts like there's some magic app, some magic button that is going to help them get the time perfect, getting the timing perfect. The reality is, we all know the stats that like only 5 or 10% of people are in market for your product or service at any given time. The other 90 plus percent of the people could be a fantastic fit, but they may be anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months or longer away from being ready for a sales conversation, ready for being at a decision stage. So is there a magic answer? No, we just need to figure out a way to stay in front of them. And it can't be by a bunch of sales nags. Are you ready to meet yet? Can we meet yet? Book a demo, book a demo, book a demo. Here's a $25 gift card, book a demo. No, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is we need to figure out a way to stay with them throughout their journey as a subject matter expert, as a teacher, as a trusted advisor. For probably 6 months or a year now, I've been recommending that marketing professionals in the data center industry be prepared to go much deeper into the buyer's journey than they ever have in the past, all the way through the decision stage, so they truly understand the impact of what they're doing. I have conversely been advising sales professionals that they need to be prepared to come back much earlier and participate and collaborate in the buyer's journey that they typically have in the past. A lot of salespeople dismissively say that content and webinars, oh, that's marketing's job, I don't need to be involved. BS. If you want your personal brand to grow, if you want your prospects and customers to be excited about meeting with you, you need to figure out a way to collaborate with the folks that are in your content and in your events and in your webinar motions and initiatives within your company, so that you're seen in position. And that you also need to be building up your personal brand, doing most of the things that we're talking about. But sales, that's why in relatively small companies, the line between sales development reps, SDRs, and account executives, AEs, is going to continue to blur, because it's incredibly important that everyone figure out a way to earn their way into that first 83% when people have enormous allergies now to spending time with sales team. Your customer success also should be prepared to come in much earlier in the journey than they ever have. Not uncommon to find CS and account managers being brought into sales conversations long before larger accounts close, for exactly the same reason, to make sure that there's smooth handoff and to make sure that everyone's focusing on the right things. So for finding prospects for larger sales at the right time, we need to figure out a way to stay with them. And we need to pay attention to what they're doing with our content and on their website. And again, This isn't rocket science technology that was just invented in the last couple months. This basic marketing technology, sales technology, CMS content management system technology has existed for the better part of 10 years. I'm partial to HubSpot coming from the HubSpot partner ecosystem, but there's certainly other options to do this. But you should know when a known contact in your database hits a pricing page, hits a product page, hits a services page, hits an about us page, the alarm bells should be going off telling you that known contact is showing that they're getting to or literally sitting in the decision stage. If you don't have that kind of alerting set up, if you're not being notified that one of your target account prospects registered for a webinar, attended a webinar, reconverted on an ebook landing page, hit certain kind of blog posts, spend time with your marketing technology people, your CMS people, and make sure that these alerts get set up, because that's how you find out when it's the right time. It's simple. I mean, for all the AI stuff that's going on now, it's going to accelerate this even faster. But this kind of sales tech, this kind of sales enablement, this kind of marketing technology has been around for a decade or so. So if you're not using these tools, you're at a severe competitive disadvantage. What company do to generate leads for larger data center related sales opportunities? So let's be clear. A lot of people misuse the term leads. A lead isn't somebody that's necessarily ready to talk to sales. It's just someone that's gone from anonymous to being a known entity that you can build a relationship with over time, or you can educate and build trust with them over time. So to generate leads, get in early, figure out a way to knock it out of the park throughout the full buyer's journey, so you have strong presence throughout awareness and consideration, not just decision. It's probably the most important factor for generating leads with larger opportunities is get in early and figure out a way that you can have content that's so good that they want to spread it to their coworkers. To improve lead generation among mid-market and enterprise IT decision makers. Again, it's a lot of what we've been talking about today is understand where your company does best, understand what your personal territory is of the ideal client profile, what's your segment, and go about building out your target account list. Once you have your target account list, make sure your LinkedIn profile is in great shape and start building first degree connections every single week in those accounts, and figure out a way to start sharing helpful educational content on your profile so people will consume that. They will be automatically nurtured, and many of them will reach out to you without ever you having to reach out to them. Make sure you have good webinar educational content kind of programs so you have a good excuse to invite people to your LinkedIn events, and then just basically pay attention to who's interested, who's showing interest consistently, and who wants help. If you think about the future of sales looking a lot more like helping the right buyers navigate their journey rather than you closing them, you'll be in much better shape. It'll look a lot more like consulting. It'll look a lot more like being an advisor as opposed to a traditional transaction focused client. And the bigger the account is, the more important it is that you multi-thread, that you really have a good handle on all the different stakeholders on each team that needs to be involved in the consideration. Center sales directors do to more successfully master lead generation. Two parts. One is lead by example. Your team is probably not going to be much better at this than you are. So make sure that you are keeping up and keeping your profile current and best practices, and really partner well with other disciplines on the go-to-market team. Make sure that you spend a lot of time working carefully with your counterparts in marketing going forward to power most of this for getting to larger accounts and decision makers will look a lot more like a media company than traditional marketing. In other words, like editorial calendars, topics, reach, segmentation, personalization, having great blogs, having great podcasts, having great webinar panels, having different kinds of webinars for different kinds of personas throughout the full buyer's journey. These all make an enormous difference with helping you up your lead generation game for larger sales at your target accounts, and specifically getting good surface area coverage among the decision committee. When prospecting for larger data center sales, what's most important is understanding who they are, what they care about, and figuring out a way to add value to their professional lives. When you do that well with the right people, a lot of the magic just starts to happen. But it really, the foundational point is starting from the top of your company. This has to be a top-down initiative. Is the culture of your company needs to change in many cases to be focused on being seen as the definitive go-to experts about your topic, about your product or service in your space. your website, your content, it should be like the Wikipedia of your industry. It's the definitive reference, not just a couple dozen pieces of content, but literally hundreds of pieces that are really, really, so people, when the right people land on your site and it's 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon and they got to figure this out, you're getting an alert or you're looking at your notifications when you come back into the office on Monday. You're like, someone from my target account was on the website for an hour and 17 minutes, consuming 37 blog posts and 41 minutes of video, and they've reconverted on 3 ebooks. They know more than our sales development rep did the first month they worked for us. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how much and they book time on my calendar. That's even more awesome, because all of the lead generation offers had a next step of ready to learn more, sign up for our free whatever. That it's most of your content offer should be focused on some kind of sales acceleration that's contextual to who they are and where they are in their journey. Those larger sales from the decision-making committee. Your sales team needs to focus on continuing to deliver value and having a way to stay with people throughout their full buyer's journey. Your best friend with all of this, because as people change roles, as people change companies, there's 2 different opportunities now to figure out Bob or Sally went to a new company. Is that a new account that I should also be prospecting, and who replaced Bob or Sally? So really, really understanding who they are, what they're doing, and figuring out a way for you to fit into that is incredibly important for larger data center customers. It's important for all. It's just that when there's more at stake, there's more of a reason than ever to get really good at doing this. Meetings with the right decision makers for data centers. A really simple thing that everyone should be doing is whenever you have a piece of premium content with a landing page, as soon as they convert on that, I call this, would you like fries with that? On the confirmation page, on the confirmation email, just simply offer them an opportunity to book time on your calendar for what your decision stage conversion offer might be. It might be a free trial. It might be a free needs assessment. For co-location operators, almost for certain, it's going to be schedule a tour. But that's how the sales acceleration happens. It's they're blown away by an awareness or consideration stage premium content offer. And something as simple as dropping a call to action for the next step on the confirmation page and or on the email can work wonders to get more meetings. And then, of course, you want to encourage them to bring their coworkers by asking who else should be there. The data center sales team due to acquire enterprise clients, all of the above that we're talking about today. Get really good at the strategy for why they should pay attention to you, grow your first degree connections, do great events, educate and build trust throughout the full journey. One more quick set of questions, then we'll head into the recommended resources and the special offer. Again, if you have any questions beyond what I've covered today, I'm going to be doing an informal Q&A session immediately following today's webinar. If you'd like your question to be considered, please drop that into the chat pane, the webinar chat pane, or in comments. And if you get some upvotes, that'll probably cause us to bump that up a little bit. But we have a pretty packed house for today. We'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible. If not, we'll reach out to you offline. How does customer education fit in with larger data center customers? Yeah, this is post-purchase when they're signed up, account retention, account activation, account onboarding. If you think about like the 3 steps of customer success life cycle, maybe like initial value, intended value, extended value. So additional training is incredibly important for cross-sells, for upsells, for retention. So all of the strategies, all the playbook stuff that we're talking about today is very focused on awareness and consideration and decision pre-sales, but your customer success team is an integral part. Your account managers are an integral part of effective go-to-market in and around the data center industry. So make sure they're involved in these same kind of conversations, and you figure out for the life cycle stage when your contact changes from opportunity to customer, when the deal stage turns over from over to closed won, WON. It's super important to make sure that you have great onboarding content, great onboarding experiences that allow you to do one-to-money effectively, that certainly allow you to do one-on-one when you need it. But making sure that you have great self-serve resources that mirror the self-serve that they were getting and expecting throughout your full journey. Can your sales team improve market penetration of all your data center products? This may not be your sales team, it may be your account managers, but again, great educational content post-purchase for introducing your new customers to how other companies similar to theirs have navigated this journey and other products and services that you offer that they've gotten value out of. So to the extent that you can do case studies, to the extent that you can do panel webinars, have an enormous impact on improving your share of wallet within those accounts. Generation attracts mid-market and enterprise decision makers. I think we've covered that quite extensively already. How can companies improve their communications with larger data center customers? and their goals, understand their challenges, and use their own words. That's the most important part, is get the consensus on their own words and use the language that you're using. Not the language that you'd like them to be receptive to, but the language that they're actually using. So we have covered a lot of ground and we're coming up on time, but as promised, I'm going to stay around for an informal Q&A session where I will address some of the questions that have come up during today's webinar. If you have to run, no worries. Everyone that's on this webinar will get a copy of the recording. And just like all the best practices that I've spoken with you about today, I would encourage you, if there are other people on your team who needed to be here, who weren't here, use this recording as a conversation starter. Incredibly impactful to get your team talking about these issues. Burying your head in the sand is not going to bring back the phone book. Not going to bring back the fax machine or the dial-up modem. The BlackBerry is not headed for. I don't want to pick on individual companies. We'll focus on technologies. The days before smartphones are not coming back, especially when you sell to mid-market and enterprise technology buyers. So if you're serious about getting to more of the right target accounts, larger accounts, getting to the right decision makers, it's really, really important to think about what's going on in the marketplace and where you fit in. And with that, I'll switch over into question and answer panel. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg for DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a connect request. We're going to send out a survey following today's webinar. We'd love to get your feedback, and you can feel free to reply back to that if you have any questions as well. You can also visit our website anytime at dcsmi.com. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll find a chat bubble on most pages where you can feel free to interact with someone from our team. Again, these are some of the big questions that came up. And with that, I will address some informal questions. So let's see what we have here first. I need to find partners who sell to data centers. I'm a distributor. I only sell to partners. How do I find them? Okay. So there's 6 kinds of roles, 6 kinds of functions on a go-to-market team. You have sales, marketing. Those are all the pre-purchase stuff. You have customer success, post-purchase. You typically have product professionals or someone wearing that hat. And you have channel partnerships, assuming that your company does channel partnerships as part of its playbook. And then you have your executive sponsor that wraps it all together. So what you're talking about there specifically, finding partners who sell to data centers as a distributor, is you're running essentially a channel partnership playbook. And the interesting part, at the risk of overcomplicate, I want to simplify this for you. Channel partner directors, channel chiefs need personas and need a go-to-market just like everyone else. So it starts with figuring out what kinds of partners you want and building a ideal client profile that defines your target partner. What company size is a good fit? What geographic location is a good fit? And are there other attributes of what they do? Are there certain technology platforms that they're invested in? Are there certain certifications or credentials they might have? But that defines at a company level who's a great partner. And then within that company, who are the most important stakeholders that you need to build a relationship with? Those are the people. Those are the personas. So it may be an owner, it may be a CTO, it may be a director of partnerships, it may be a head of engineering, whatever it is, you figure out who the first and the second most important kind of contact that you need to build relationships with at each of those companies, and go and do the research and build out a buyer persona for there. And then you need, just like we talked about today, especially for larger accounts, you need a strategy to attract and engage and build value, build relationships with those partners, so you're seen as an expert, a thought leader, a teacher, a trusted advisor, and can almost guarantee you that what your channel partners care about is going to be very different than what the end users care about. There's certainly some overlap, but understanding your channel partners' goals, understanding the challenges of each of those most important stakeholders, and then building out a content strategy, a webinar strategy, an event strategy that allows you to teach them and engage with them early on and throughout their full journey is extremely important. Coming from the standpoint, I was fortunate enough relatively early on in my career to work with Microsoft's Small Business Channel Partner Program for 2 years. And even at the time, Microsoft had such enormous market share that it really did not have to work too hard to get companies to be interested in partnering with them. And obviously, go 2 decades beyond that, it's even easier for companies that have that kind of brand to attract partners. if you don't have the luxury of having a blue chip brand like that, and you're more at the other end of the extremer spectrum where not a lot of the technology partners know who your company is, this playbook becomes even more important. Start with where they are, not where you ultimately want them to be, but start with where they actually are, with being a great resource of topics and knowledge and information about things that they need to know to grow their business before they even know that your channel partner program exists. Person's looking for recording. Yes, everyone that's on this recording that registered, in other words, we know who you are, then we will be sending out the recording that's typically sent out within one day. Yes, will the recording be sent out? I'd like to share this with my colleagues. I encourage you to share this with your colleagues. And exactly what I talked about today is content can be a great way for your point of view, for your positioning, to get spread to other stakeholders on the decision committee and every single person that's on this webinar that cares about improving what they're doing with target accounts, with decision makers and larger sales, should be taking that same kind of mindset. Able to get a copy of the presentation. Yeah, the recording will be going out. Was the final question, or at least the final question that we'll have time to answer. We, for some reason, didn't get to your question. You'll be getting a survey following today's webinar. We always are looking to improve what we're doing with our webinar program. It's a huge part of what we do here at DCSMI, so we'd love to get your feedback. You'll also have the opportunity to respond back to that email if you have any questions that we didn't get to address. And I would encourage you, if you're serious about generating better leads and getting to more decision makers, getting better coverage on the decision committee, and growing larger sales, to use what we talked about today as a turning point, as a conversation starter with the other stakeholders in your company. Because if you're serious about growing your business with these kinds of companies, the playbook for today for doing this in a self-service research motion where people are more allergic to sales content than they've ever been is a reframe and a reposition so that you're seen as the best experts, the definitive go-to experts, the preeminent experts on your topic and your space. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals. I wish you great success in growing your business, and let us know how we can help. Take care now and enjoy the rest of your day. The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.